So, Gloria, Nancy and I will change seats for a minute. So, welcome everybody. My name is not Nancy Morejón, though there are days I wish it were, because there's not anybody better to be. But my name is Miriam Ansara, and I'm so glad you can join us. This is the fourth in the series from Perspectives from Havana in a year of COVID-19 and the US embargo. I think most of you have been here already for some of the other series. And so I, like Nancy, am speaking to you from Havana, where I spend part of the year. Our main sponsors are Massachusetts Peace Action, the Latin American Solidarity Coalition of Western Massachusetts, and the Center for Cuban Studies. And there are another 18 sponsoring organizations across the US and Canada. Assyria is also a sponsor, but didn't make it onto this week's list, but they also are. We thank all of these organizations for bringing all of you to us and bringing us to them, to their organizations. Last week, we had technical difficulties, which some of you were here for, and some of you may never come back because of them. As you may know, there is an underwater cable with broadband running 3 miles off of Havana that we are prohibited from connecting to by the US embargo. So the data that we can access is limited. And we also, because Zoom for some reason refuses to get a license from the US government, we have to use a VPN. So it's very complicated, and we apologize for any technical difficulties. Natasha Bannon is here because she does Zoom all the time. And if we have technical difficulties, she says she will help. So we are going to go with video only tonight. What we think is that if we shut all of you off, which we really wish we didn't have to do, then the bandwidth will be better, we hope. I have to say that the speaker tonight is the exquisite and wonderful Nancy Morejón. She is a prize-winning poet, an essayist. Essayist. How do you say that, Bob Marcus? I don't know how to say it.
Essayist.
Thank you. Imaginarian. It's hard to have words enough to describe the breadth of her thinking and her work. Pandemia. As this is a program where we want to give people in Cuba the chance to say what they want about their country, she also chose the topic, and it's a wonderful topic. A moderator is Gloria Caballero, also from Cuba, and now the new candidate for mayor of Holyoke, Massachusetts. I would say the first Cuban American in New England to run for mayor. And she is assisted by Sandra Levinson of the Center for Cuban Studies and Cole Harrison of Massachusetts Peace Action. We will follow the usual format this evening. I will ask Nancy a first question, and she will talk for 12 to 15 minutes. From there, Gloria, with Sandra and Cole's assistance, will pose to Nancy questions in the chat from you. So you put your questions in, they'll sort through them, and they'll present them to Nancy as we have time. Last week, well, to make it easier for them to sort through the questions, we asked that you pose questions only for Nancy. Last week, on top of the technical difficulties, so much chat in the chat was about a range of topics that it was quite hard to sort through the questions that were directly for Nancy. So we are going to ask that you.
Mary, I accidentally muted you. There you go.
I'm fine. So here's the thing. Cole, would you please post my email in the chat?
Donna,
Tammy, I don't know who you sent it to.
right, everybody. Focus here. Cole will post my email in the chat. And then if you have questions that are not related to the topic or related to Nancy and what Nancy knows, you can email them to me and I will either answer them or I will, as I do in the follow-up every week, send you the list of all of the co-sponsoring organizations. And I'm sure that they can answer them for you. So about 5 minutes before we end, Gloria is going to ask Nancy if she has anything she wants to add, because this is her evening. And then after that, we are going to give you actions that you can take to help lift the sanctions and end the embargo. And I have to tell you that Antonio from the Latin American Working Group has reported that there was an uptick in signatures on their petition to lift the embargoes. So this is good, keep at it. And then we'll keep the chat open for another 5 to 7 minutes so that you can actually click on the links and write. MAPA has this wonderful thing. You click on the link to write a letter, it takes you right to your senator and your congresspeople, and you write directly to them, as well as to the president and that Blinken fellow, and you tell them that you want this embargo lifted. So that's the plan. So glad that you all are here. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, and I'm going to say, Nancy, what does pandemia, what does pandemic mean to you?
Well, thanks a lot. Before saying some words, I would like just to give thanks to the organizations and sponsors, especially the Massachusetts Peace Action and all of you, because of your presence, although it is virtual. I don't care about it. I feel you very, very near, as I feel Gloria Caballero and Sandy Levinson, you know, they're friends ever since. So I would like also to give thanks to Mary and Sarah. She has done a wonderful job, you know, preparing this kind of virtual conference. I'm not very comfortable, not because I don't like it, but because it's, I think, one of my third experience in this sense. But pandemics, you know, they need, you know, to be talking about, and that we need to know what's happened to us. I wrote an article, an essay, a very brief essay about pandemics. I was saying that we did have 2 pandemics, the case of Cuba. One pandemic, very old, a pandemic of almost 62 years old, which is the embargo. There are people who know me and they know I have been, you know, denouncing and talking about this pandemic, the first pandemic against Cuban people, to our people, because people think sometimes that the embargo goes against our government. It is not only that, it is an embargo against Cuban people, which sometimes turn out to be against Cuban diaspora. I would like maybe that Gloria Caballero may talk about this, not only Cubans within the island, but the Cubans abroad, Cubans all over the world. So the second pandemic, well, is what we know as COVID-19, which started very strongly around 2020. It was really something really sad and bitter and hard, because we did not know something like that. Nobody. We know many things about viruses. We do have doctors, and we have our health system is very devoted to make research on viruses. But this one, which was born in Wuhan, the Chinese city of Wuhan, came all over, and not only in my country, but in the Western world, all over the world, Europe and Africa, everywhere. So we need to know that there are things which are mysterious. They come and they invade us. I have a friend in Spain, in Salamanca, the very famous university city, that says he's a Peruvian and he's based in Salamanca as a professor of literature. And he says that this is an invisible invasion. You cannot see, it's in the air, and you can be contagious with it, not knowing what is going to happen to you. But I am a witness of the courage of Cuban people, Cuban doctors, just fighting against, in our territory, in our island, fighting against this pandemic. I don't know if you want me to stop here and to start to raise questions about this or what we're gonna do.
Nancy, I have a question just for an introduction. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Nancy, for your time, for how much light you bring into, the world of literature and all this knowledge. I would like to ask you, Nancy, if that's okay. What does pandemia, how does the pandemic, how has it affected or influenced your work, your literary production, your poetry? Is this a creative moment for you, or is it something that has redefined the work of Nancy Morejón? Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your question, very interesting. Let me tell you, I was almost in jail. I was closed at home. It was a very special experience because I'm not that kind of poet or writer who nourishes from loneliness. I don't. I think that writing puts you in link with other people, all kinds of people. So I could not get away. I could not, what happens to everybody. And I started to write poems and things and so forth. But the first thing I wrote, which is an experience, is just a short story. A tale, let's say, a short story about two Cuban women in the street talking in a line, talking about everyday life. And through this dialogue, these women, they realized that they're in danger. Why? Because there is a pandemic called COVID-19. They barely can pronounce the name COVID-19. They say, eso que anda, that thing that walks and runs around, but kill people. We did have at the very beginning a very few dead people, but it's been increasing and increasing, and actually we're having what we call in Spanish, I don't know in English how you can tell that. We are victims now of a cepa, a new cepa, a new strain of the virus, which means that big cities and, emblematic cities in Cuba, like Santiago de Cuba and Havana, have been increasingly having contagious and, people, sick about the COVID. There is a very important statistics about people who have survived, but it's been a real challenge for our doctors and so forth. And for the moment, there is an increasing number of dead people, which is very, it's painful. It's so sad, But the most important thing for me is that they did have care. I mean, we did care about them. They received attention, medical attention. In many other places, they don't. For instance, I visited 2 years ago. I attended a poetry festival in Guayaquil, Ecuador. That poetry festival was great, and people are so peaceful there, so nice people. And suddenly there was in the news, in the internet, everywhere, dead people in the streets who could not have been buried. The bodies were just in the streets. It was so sad for me. And this is not our case. Not in Santiago, not in Santa Clara, not in Camaguaní or Pinar del Rio or Havana. We don't. People receive health care, and people everywhere in the world, they know that Cuban Revolution cares about health care. It's not news. But it's important to tell now the heart of the increasing numbers of contagious people that people who die is because it's helpless, but never because they don't receive health care.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Nancy,
Unstable, what happens?
You're back now.
Some of us have lived with instability all over.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, next
So
question.
we have another question. Thank you so much, Nancy. That was great. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Gloria. It's right from me. You're my family.
Yes, yes,
Almost my family.
that's true. That is true. We're sisters. Nancy,
Yeah.
there is a question from
Yes.
someone says that her name is Ann Sitkin and she is la hija de Julio Girona.
Oh my goodness, a very Cuban artist, yes.
Sí.
He passed away some decades ago, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
his daughter,
He
Ann
was a
Sitkin.
man, yeah.
So Ann Sitkin, la hija de
So,
Girona, yeah, she wants to know your opinion about the Patria or Vida protests. What you think about those protests?
First of all, they are very far away from me, those protests. I think that people have the right of protest, but that one with their slogan of Patria y Vida, it's something which is a commonplace, a very commonplace, because there are many other speakers in the history of Cuba that have talked about not only Patria o Muerte, because Patria o Muerte was an option for Patria and life. But we were, very oppressed by the embargo and oppressed by US invasions, which is not invisible like the COVID-19. But anyway, we do know that we defend our homeland, our land, our island, and that's what it means. So we don't reject, personally, I don't reject Patria y Vida, because it comes as a process. It's been a process in the very early times, which we used to talk about Patria y Vida and Patria o Muerte, okay? Because you can say, why Patria o Muerte? Because we were, devoted to defend our land. So if in that defense of our land we die, okay, welcome. That death is welcome. I have a very old poem from the 70s, the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s, called April, exactly April, where there was the very first important invasion of the US government or the Cubans, refugees or whatever, the Cuban exiles. And then that's the name of one of my books, Where the Island Sleeps Like a Wind. And there I talk about April. We will we will fall down in the sands. And that's the meaning of patria o muerte, patria y vida.
Nancy, I think I lost.
What's up? I have no skills for these systems.
However,
Oh my God.
while Gloria looks at the questions,
Yes.
here is something from Robert Cohen.
Oh,
Says
welcome. Hello.
his favorite lines from Nancy's poem, "A dream of reason produces monsters."
Yes.
Would you read this, Nancy?
Yes, it's a line from Goya, the great Spanish painter. It says, "My monsters, you have the elegance that the epoch requires. You have learned to be what you aren't and what you are. You practice theory. They say how form and beauty arrive privileged with reason's sweet seeker making dreams and inner fire. Let the mammoth and the stag I've never seen enter the neighborhood trumpeting."
Yes. Thank you, Nancy. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Gloria, do you have other questions there?
Yes.
Because I
Yes, I have another question from the chat. And someone wants to know about the role of the poet in this time, in the time of
Well,
COVID, the role of
yes.
the poet in this time.
I love, yes, nice question. First of all, the role of a poet is to write good poems. That's the very first thing to do. You have to write well. You have to, to write correctly, let's say. You cannot leave a message if your writing is wrong, if your writing is lacking of perfection. So the very first duty of a poet, of a writer, is to write good, to write well. Then a poet, a writer may have options. You may write about your family, you may write about your country, or you may write about cats. That's your option. So in any way, you have the duty to write well.
Thank you, Nancy. Lenny Villagomez, she wants to know about the structure of the poem Richard trajo su flauta. And because there are stanzas that come with numbers and there are other stanzas that come without numbers. They go from 1 and then stanza 8 and then other stanzas without numbers. She's asking, ¿qué significa que haya versos sin números y otros con números en tu poema Richard trajo su flauta?
An editing problem, not a writing problem, because it's a stanzas. So all stanzas have a number. It's an important poem in the sense that it's, it's like a tribute to the memory of Richard Airways, the great Cuban flutist of Aragon Orchestra. That's it, but it is in the borough. It's my cousins, you know, the Black family in the heart of Havana. That's it. So I spoke yesterday with Gladys, and there's a little a short poem for her when she was just arriving to have 15 years old. Just the day that she was arriving to her 15 years old, there was a party, a big party, in the traditional, you know, of the quinces, you know, the parties for, but we were at the former Hilton Hotel. And that day, that exactly day, the US and Cuba broke relations because of a kind of tax that the US asked to Cuban government, talking about sugar industry. So that day is unforgettable to me, completely unforgettable, because we were in the Hilton Hotel, celebrating Gladys's 15 years.
May I interject with a question? And this is actually a question to Bob Marcus, because on the Zoom call are two of my favorite poets. And I do want to ask Bob if you have something that you would like to say or contribute or ask to Nancy. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I must.
I would like to contribute a big hug. No, I'm just so thrilled actually to see Nancy after so many years we haven't seen each other.
Yes.
And I must say I've missed you, man. But I'm not sure I know what to add, because I'm here basically to listen. And I think that the time calls for it. I don't know exactly how to put it, but the time calls for invention. Okay. And the people who invent most sharply and unexpectedly tend to be poets. And the best of them, okay, don't make a division between ordinary life and the grandeur of poetry. And Nancy is one of those poets.
Thank you. That's a compliment, Robert. A great compliment.
Con mucho gusto y un abrazote bien grande.
Grandísimo. Un beso enorme y un pellizco para Maggie.
So we have more questions here, and actually, Nancy, if you
Please go
look at the chat, Nancy, there is Dr. Deidre Williams, and she wants to connect with you. She would like to work on a project, you know, a cultural project with you, and it says that, like you said, she's quoting you, right? That poetry that connects the people, and she would like to connect with you and work on a poetry, you know, a cultural project with you. And this is it possible? And how can she connect with you? Is there a way to get your contact?
For this very moment, she will be in touch with my host, Mary and Sarah. And then we will work on that. I have other projects. For instance, I'm finishing my memories that will be published soon, but I have to, you know, rewrite, which is one of the great secrets of writing. You have to work, you have to rewrite. So I'm doing many things, and sometimes, although, you know, I have plenty of time because I am at home, but sometimes I have to work with the Unión magazine that I work for. And there are things I have to do. I have to translate also. So this is it.
Yes.
But I will receive that project open wide.
Good, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams.
No, you're
Thanks a
very
lot.
welcome, Lori.
Yeah. There's another question, and I think it's also, you know, all the questions are really interesting. Berta Benitez, Bernice, I'm sorry, Berta. She wants to know, how do the arts and your voice contribute to the unfolding of Cuban values? ¿Cómo las artes levantan los valores cubanos? Your voice, the arts.
Can I answer that in Spanish or in English? I will keep on talking in English.
If you answer in Spanish, Gloria, do you want to translate?
I'll do my best. I think we have a wonderful audience here that speak, you know, it's bilingual. Yes, I'll do my best.
Just to relax a little bit, you know.
I know.
Bueno, hablamos de arte y es tan difícil definir el arte.
We talk about arts and it's so hard to define what the arts is.
Podemos hacerlo. Hay que hacer arte, pero definirlo es muy difícil, es el gran reto de cualquier escritor. Entonces,
I think, yeah, you have to work, and then defining what the arts is the biggest challenge of any writer. You know, the arts it's a matter of working through the arts. It's doing, it's hands-on, defining it. It's just it's a big challenge for writers.
Entonces, los valores que tengo yo son los valores cubanos, de donde sea, porque es mi identidad. Yo tengo una identidad cubana que también se relaciona, forma parte del ámbito de los archipiélagos del Caribe.
And Nancy said, well, I have an identity, I have my values, and those values and that identity also speaks to, you know, a larger component which make up what is all the islands in the Caribbean. And I can add, well, this is Caribbean values, this is Cuban value, this is multicultural, multi-ethnic values that Nancy is appealing to. Yeah.
Entonces yo creo que esos valores no están en la suela de los zapatos.
Those values are not, you know, the sole of your shoes, they're not there.
Quiere decir que tú tienes la identidad según donde estén tus zapatos. No, hay una identidad que tú tienes, que tú guardas y que tú expresas donde quiera que estés.
So your identity is not where your shoes are. No. That identity is where you are, what expresses who you are from inside, wherever you are.
Are you satisfied? I'm not the person who raised the question.
¿Está satisfecha la persona? ¿Cómo las artes, como tu voz, levantan los valores cubanos?
Y también creo que es, y también es un elogio de esta persona decir que los valores cubanos forman parte de mi obra.
And it's also, you know, a compliment. Thank you very much that on the part of that person, when that person says that the Cuban values are part of my work. Thank you very much.
I would like to add something.
Yes.
Because in May, usually in Cuba, you know, that revolution came, the force of recognizing, acknowledging African elements of our culture as Cubans. We do have Spaniards, Spanish elements, components, and African ones. So May 25th, usually in Cuba, is just the date dedicated to our African elements, our African components. And it's called African Day, the Day of Africa. And that was a date where George Floyd was killed, exactly, was killed in May, last May, 2020, was killed in Minneapolis, you know, all of you, you know that. And I wrote, I was very angry, I was upset, I was revolted.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a poem which brought back many others, around 10, 12, for George Floyd. And I do believe that it is really important for us to know about that crime that reveals that we do have Middle Ages values inside modern societies. We cannot accept the language of Ku Klux Klan alive in a revival that we have to stop. So I think it is so important to talk about George Floyd and to know about him, and to know that because he was, you know, going to make shopping, go to buy something with a false bill or whatever, nobody has a right, you know. Policemen don't have the right to kill. I can make a protest anywhere about something I don't want to. If I do it, maybe yelling or walking or doing things, that's my right. Who tells me, who can tell that the right of policemen is just to kill, just to keep the order, or, you know, to protect people? We cannot accept that. So in that sense, I'm really devoted to my very, very great mentor, Nicolás Guillén, who wrote beautiful, beautiful poems. For instance, the one that he said, I will tell that in Spanish. No sé por qué piensas tú, soldado, que te odio yo, si somos la misma cosa, tú, yo.
Amen. Yes, amen. And we have Roberto Marquez. I know you translated, Roberto Marquez, all of Nicolás Guillén's poems.
It was both my honor and my privilege.
Yes. Yes.
He, in my estimation, he's one of the masters of the world in poetry, and one of the masters of human sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it possible to communicate to other people the hardest issues.
Yes. Yes. Nancy, we have two more questions here, and one says, when did you know that you were a poet? And the second one was, could you please, if you have it at hand, could you please read the poem that you wrote of George Floyd, please?
Yes, well, nobody knows what a poet is. I cannot tell you. I have been, you know, talking about this ever since 1962, where my very first poems were published by El Puente. It's very difficult to tell. You keep on, you do, it's a process. You are aware of that process or not. You may develop your own writing or not. You know, that's a mystery, and we have to respect the rational condition of writing.
Yes.
That's very, very important. Although I believe in inspiration, you know, in this sense, I always quote Ernest Hemingway, who was always saying, la inspiración que me agarre trabajando, which means I will always welcome inspiration, but inspiration will come to me while I am writing. I'm not passively, you know, looking at the skies, looking at heaven,
Yes.
just to, you know, do my writings. But I do think that inspiration
Perspiration.
Yes.
It happened to me with joy. I wanted to denounce, but it was my right and my pleasure to write about this guy I did not know. I have never been to Minneapolis. I have visited many, many cities in the US for a while, for a long time, but never that city. And suddenly, you know, I wrote in internet, in the news about this horrible and awful crime. I will do my best, and I will give the floor now to Mary and Sarah, because I have to look for the poem and read it to you in English, because there's a wonderful English translation by my friend Ana Elena de Arasosa.
Thank you, Nancy.
Hello, everybody. Well, well, Nancy looks for the poem. And I'm happy to say I have not introduced all the poets who are on this call, but I am very glad to say that there are a number of poets. And I would ask, if you are a poet, please put that in the chat, because I think everybody should know. But there it is. We can open it.
Okay. Oh, yes, it's technology. Get out of here.
Okay. Here, you can read it right from there, Nancy.
Oh, but I want to know if this is the translation. Yeah, A Black Prince Rose for George Floyd. Yes, I will read it there. I want to say that, please, I'm sorry if I make a mistake. You know, my mother tongue Spanish, not English, unfortunately, but it's like that. So I may have an accent, a Havana accent where I was born and raised. But anyway, I will read it this way. So this poem was the very first one I wrote on that crime. And then I wrote many others, and I made a choice, and there is a selection of poems called, in Spanish, Madrigal para un príncipe negro. So I cannot recall now. Let me see the title. Yes, A Black Prince Rose for George Floyd. Though he wanted to throw you in the Mississippi, the cannibal in the murky uniform with his knee has scorched into silence your motionless throat. The smoke of your flesh ascends to a wet heaven. Hoping among the flowers, your breath chases his ghost and manages to bite the bloody fan of the cannibal. But you inspire indomitable lying on the wet asphalt under the quiet shade of an apple tree in Minneapolis, where we will place for you this shining, clean Black Prince of ours to your memory.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy.
No, you're very welcome. In Cuban language, let me explain to you. In spoken language, you know, language has two faces. The one who is written, the one who is spoken.
Yes.
In Cuban spoken language, especially in Havana, which is my hometown, we call Príncipe Negro red roses.
Yes.
It's a mystery I cannot explain. So I was given a red rose to George Floyd. And that's why it's called Madrigal for George Floyd, to whom I give a Black Prince.
Amen. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes. Nancy, before we, because it's 5 off, before we go, Is there anything else you would like to tell all of us before we wrap up and start the call to action?
Well, but I did have a very nice time talking to old friends like Maddie and Robert Marquez. I would have liked, that big hearts would be, given through technology. It's impossible, but it's a dream. And, all of us, we are fitted by dreams. It's been a great, great work. I want to give thanks to Mary and Sarah, to Sandy Levinson, to other friends, who care about Cuban culture and Cuban art. And this is important. It's not me, it's just writers and poets and artists in my island.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Please.
Very.
You're breaking up, Nancy. I mean, Mary, you're breaking up.
All of our sessions have been wonderful, and they're not over yet. Next week, we will have
I think we once again want to thank Nancy Morejón, her time, her dedication, her beautiful poetry, and all her wisdom. Thank you all for joining us once more this night. And there are so many actions that we can all take, and it's on the chat in support for the lifting of the embargo to Cuba, and in support of the different actions for more syringes, and let's see if we can bring some solidarity and cooperation between scientists, between Cubans and Americans. Let's hope that the arts become the new language, and for peace and for understanding and cooperation.
So, sorry, everybody, that was the evil empire intervening. We know it was the evil empire, and we know that we should rush on down to Palm Beach County and tell that evil empire what we think of him. But anyway, in the meantime, I was saying next week we will hear from the next generation.
Maria.
And then after that, we have an addition, which is that Esteban Morales, fortunately, has recovered his health quite well. And he says that he wants to talk. And what he wants to talk about is, I said, well, what about talking about US-Cuba relations? And he said what he wants to talk about is, do Cuban-US relations have a future? So that's what he's going to talk about. And then if we can find a way to do it, and Cole can find room on his calendar, we have a group of kind of extraordinary women. They are called Cergy, the Afro-descendant Cuban women's team. And they would like to make a presentation, which will be probably, it may have to be pre-recorded and translated. But at any rate, what they would like to talk about is, what is Cuba? Which is an interesting question. Some of what Nancy has said. So now, all of this, and sitting there thinking, and also making my internet connections unstable. Anyway, we want you to take action. And maybe in the interest of my unstable connection, Cole, you could take over and go over the actions and help people figure out what it is that they can do. Would you mind?
Okay, I can do that. Let me see if I can put myself up so that people can see who's talking to them.
I'll put you up, Cole.
Okay, thank you. So we have several ways to take action tonight. I have put the links in the chat, so scroll back the chat and you can click right there on the links. But they're also displayed here in the share screen. The first is you can write to President Biden and Secretary Blinken and your own representative and senators to lift the embargo. It actually lists several specific points. So you type in your address and it looks up who your representative and senator are, and then it figures out how to send it to them. So that's the first thing. The second is we have 3 petitions, or maybe I should say the second, third, or fourth. We have a petition from the Latin American Working Group to restore diplomatic ties. We have a,
Oh, you froze instead of me, so I'll finish until you come back on.
sorry, I didn't understand what you said, Mary. What?
Are you back?
I'm going to keep going. Third is Move On has a petition to restore Obama's Cuba policy. And finally, IFCO Pastors for Peace has a petition, Let Cuba Breathe. So please go through all those petitions and fill them out so that all the decision makers get a lot of messages and a lot of political pressure. And finally, we have Syringes for Cuba is a new project that is going to send, I don't know how many million
5 million.
syringes. What?
5 million syringes.
So many million
They need
syringes,
30 million total.
30 million. And
So we're going to send 5 million.
we're going to send 5 million. Okay. And that is for the COVID vaccine, because Cuba has made the vaccine, but it needs syringes to inject it. So this is a fundraising campaign. The official launch has not happened yet. So when you click on there, you don't get an immediate thing to give your money, but you have a place to sign up that says, I'm going to give the money when the campaign launches. But the launch is coming soon. So those are the 5 ways we have for you to take action tonight. Take a minute. We'll just keep the connection open for 5 minutes so everyone can go through all those 5 things and fill them out.
Importantly, people are also putting in the chat, which I had hoped that they would do, other actions that people can take. For instance, Essayist, which is a pretty new alliance for Cuba, and it has actions you can take. There's also the Saving Lives campaign, which it's important for you to go to that link. They're one of our co-sponsors, and there's all kinds of activities that you can join in. There also are regular caravans all over the country, including in Holyoke, Massachusetts. It was started by Cuban Americans. So we're following the lead of Cuban Americans in this, all over the country. And I will tell you that there have also been caravans in Las Tunas, Cuba, and Villa Clara, Cuba. And those are not only cars, there have been skates and bicycles. So to anybody who says, well, I don't have a car, I can't join in a car caravan, I say, get out your skates or get out your bicycle and get out your flag and find something and join it. We're building up to a vote in the United Nations on June 23rd. And there will be activities being organized all over the world to try to make this year the year that there's not only
We lost you after this is the year there's not only.
a near unanimous vote, a full vote, and the United States will feel impelled to take the simple actions that he can take, which is he can restore remittances. He can do this by executive order. He can restore remittances. He can take Cuba off the list of terrorists. He can reopen the consulate at the US consulate in Havana. As some people are threatening to have happen in the Guantanamo Naval Base, which is not. We need also to, well, there's several other things.
Well, Mary, you're breaking up too much, so I think we're going to ask you to put all those words of wisdom in the follow-up message. After each program, Mary sends out an email to everybody who is registered with a link to the video so that you can share it with your friends, and also to the action steps that you can take. And maybe she will be so good as to put in all these additional organizing plans that she's trying to go through here. Unfortunately, our bandwidth to Havana is not perfect, and we're doing our best with the technology. I will leave it there. Thank you, everyone who came out tonight. We appreciate it so much, and we'll see you next week for the 5th installment of our Perspectives from Havana series. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Cole.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Marian.
Buenas noches.
No, buenas
Buenas
noches.
noches. Thank you.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Yes,
Bye.
outstanding. Nancy
Tsunami
nació
en Minneapolis.
Great moderation, Gloria.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
All right, take care.
Take care. Send you my email.
Oh, you did? Wait a minute. Where is it? You sent it to my email?
Yeah, it was a general one.
Wait a minute. I don't see it.
I'll post it again.
Good
Okay. Post again, please, before we go. I don't want to.
Yes.
Okay.